What if the thing everyone overlooks is the only thing that can save them? That was the quiet truth waiting to rise in Redemption Gulch, long before anyone understood how much it mattered. Clayton Thorne rode into town on a bright, dusty Tuesday morning in 1878. The Montana Territory stretched wide and rough around him, its sharp beauty baked under the hard sun. Redemption Gulch sat in the middle of that vast land like a stubborn promise. One street, wood buildings with false fronts, dust that settled in every crack, people who lived on grit and half-believed hope. And on this morning, the moment Clayton's horse stepped onto the main road, every single person stopped and looked. He wasn't a man who tried to be noticed. His duster was the color of the earth. His hat brim was low and stained from long miles. His horse was sturdy, not decorated, but his eyes were what held the town still. Gray and sharp, like a storm rolling in. They saw everything, the sheriff leaning on a post to look casual, the twitch in a curtain at the mercantile, the car dealer freezing mid-shuffle at the saloon door. Clayton handed his reins to a wide-eyed stable boy. His voice was deep and steady as he said, "Give him a good rub-down and fresh water." The boy nodded fast, as if the quiet command carried weight he couldn't explain. Clayton turned toward the hotel, but before he took 3 steps, the door of the mercantile swung open. Rosalind Finch stepped into the sunlight, like someone stepping onto a stage. She was the woman every cowboy in Redemption Gulch talked about. Gold hair pinned in perfect waves, blue dress clean and crisp, untouched by dust. A smile that knew exactly what effect it had. The blacksmith paused with his hammer in the air. 2 cowboys straightened up. Even the wind seemed to wait. She moved toward Clayton with a soft, practiced stumble, letting her hand fall lightly on his arm. "Oh my," she said with a sweet tone. "Forgive me." "The dust here is dreadful." Clayton didn't melt under her touch like others did. His expression stayed calm, respectful, distant. "No harm done, ma'am." "You must be new here," she said, smiling brighter. "I'm Rosalind Finch. My father owns the Whispering Creek Ranch." "Clayton Thorne?" he answered simply. Her eyes sparkled. "A pleasure." Before she could say more, the mercantile door opened again. No crowd held its breath this time. No one paused to stare. Josephine Finch stepped out carrying a heavy sack of flour and a box of supplies. Her brown hair was tied back tight. Her dress was plain, the color of faded earth. A thin scar ran from her temple down to her jaw. She moved with a limp she tried to hide, her arms straining under the weight. Rosalind's smile tightened. "My sister Josephine," she said in a tone meant to keep Josie in her shadow. Josie's grip slipped, the flour sack tilted, and she stumbled. Before it could fall, Clayton moved. His hand steadied the bottom of the sack with perfect timing, and he lifted the box from her arms as if it weighed nothing. Josie looked up, startled. Her hazel eyes wide, cheeks dusted with flour. "Thank you, sir. I can manage," she said softly. "I know you can," he replied, his voice low and warm, "but you don't have to." His eyes didn't linger on her scar or her limp. They held something else, something searching and seeing. Rosalind stiffened. The street saw it. The whispers started fast. Clayton walked beside Josie to her wagon and set the supplies down carefully. She avoided his eyes, unused to anyone helping her. "Do you work the ranch?" he asked gently. Josie nodded. "Someone has to." For the first time, he smiled, small, honest. "Then we already have something in common." That moment stayed with him long after he left. And it stayed with the whole town, too, sparking talk that ran through every corner of Redemption Gulch by sundown. Rosalind Finch, the beauty of the valley, had been ignored. And Josie Finch, the sister no one saw, had been noticed. Days passed, and Rosalind tried everything to claim Clayton's attention. Planned meetings, bright dresses, sweet words. She invited him to dinner at Whispering Creek Ranch, certain it would win him. Clayton accepted out of manners, not desire. The ranch showed its struggles the moment he arrived. The fences sagged. The cattle were thin. Orville Finch, the father, greeted him with a weak handshake and whiskey in his eyes. Rosalind sparkled in a crimson dress, talking endlessly about parties in St. Louis and culture back east. Josie served the food silently. Her limp was more noticeable next to her sister's graceful posturing. But Clayton kept watching her small, careful movements as she cleared the plates. He noticed the way she watered down her father's whiskey without him knowing. He saw how she protected what little the family had. When the meal ended, Rosalind brought Clayton to the porch. She smiled up at him under the moonlight. "The nights here are beautiful," she breathed. Clayton wasn't looking at the stars. He was staring toward the kitchen window where Josie washed dishes alone. "Your sister works hard," he said quietly. Rosalind waved a hand. "Oh, Josie likes it. She's meant for chores. Not everyone belongs in society." Clayton said nothing, but something inside him shifted. A few days later, he found Josie alone at the northern fence line, working a post hole digger into the earth. No ranch hands, no help. Just her small frame pushing through hard ground under a hot sun. "That's heavy work for one person," Clayton said. She jumped, hand going to the hatchet on her belt. Then she breathed out when she saw him. "It needs doing," she said. Fence goes down. The herd wanders off. "Where are your ranch hands?" Her voice carried a quiet truth. "We had to let them go." No money. Without a word, Clayton took his duster off and lifted the digger from her hands. "Show me where the next post goes." For hours they worked in steady silence, digging, setting posts, tamping the earth. He didn't treat her like a fragile thing. He treated her like someone equal, someone capable. And slowly, Josie spoke. She told him about the land, the water, the cattle's sickness last spring. She explained how rotating pastures could save the grass. She even talked about the hidden canyon with the salt lick she had found years ago. Clayton listened like every word mattered, because to him, they did. When the sun began to dip, he looked at her with something like awe. This woman was not the shadow her sister tried to make her. She was strength. She was grit. She was heart. And he knew, standing there in the fading light, that Redemption Gulch had just changed the course of his life. Danger had a way of riding into the Finch ranch without making a sound. It didn't show itself with gunshots or shouted threats. It came through whispers carried on the wind, through the hard looks men exchanged in the saloon, and through the quiet fear hiding behind Josephine Finch's steady work. That fear grew the day Clayton Thorne saw the fancy buggy parked outside the Finch house. Bart Higgins had come. He was a thick, smug man, dressed in a suit that strained at the seams, and a smile that never reached his cold eyes. He lived on swallowing smaller ranches and turning families into ghosts. And Whispering Creek Ranch was choking on debt, thin cattle, and a father who spent more time with whiskey than with land. Clayton had seen this kind of man before. He knew the ruin they left behind. When he walked into the parlor, Higgins was leaning close over Orville Finch. The old man looked small and lost, clutching a half-empty glass. "You're broke," Higgins said, his voice soft like poison. "Sell me the ranch. My offer is more than fair." "It was my wife's land," Orville mumbled weakly. "Your wife is gone," Higgins pressed. "And promises don't keep your daughters fed." Josie stood in the hall, watching, her hands clenched. She had fought for this ranch with every breath she had, and now Higgins was trying to tear it from her father's shaking hands. Clayton stepped into the room. "That's enough," he said calmly. Higgins turned, scowling. "This is a private matter." "It looks like you're taking advantage of a drunk man," Clayton replied. "Come back when he's sober." The room went quiet. Higgins wasn't used to anyone standing up to him. "You're making a mistake," Higgins growled. "My offer won't last." "It doesn't need to," Clayton said. Higgins left with a glare full of hate, and Josie let out a breath she had been holding for far too long. "Thank you," she whispered. Clayton shook his head. "He'll be back. Men like him always come back." And he was right. Whispering Creek Ranch slipped into a storm that no one could see, but everyone could feel. Riders followed the property line. Tools went missing. Fences mysteriously collapsed. The sheriff shrugged at everything, too frightened of Higgins's influence to intervene. Clayton refused to let Josie face it alone. He hired 2 good ranch hands with his own money, Peterson, an old rancher with a steady aim, and Will, a fast young rider with fire in his heart. Together they strengthened fences, checked water lines, and prepared for whatever was coming. While they worked, Josie and Clayton grew closer without trying. They talked about cattle and creek beds, about the land's stubborn ways, and about survival. The bond between them deepened, built on hard work and quiet truth rather than charm or showmanship. But danger came sooner than anyone expected. One night, Clayton woke to a strange brightness flickering through the bunkhouse window. It glowed too wild, too angry to be lantern light. Fire! He ran outside. The barn was a roaring wall of flames. Hay popped inside like gunfire. Sparks flew across the yard, carried by the wind toward the house. Josie was already there, shouting orders, her limp forgotten. Her face was lit by orange fire, fierce and determined. "Get the horses out!" she yelled. "Will, open the gate and drive them clear of the barn?" Rosalind stood frozen on the porch in her silk nightgown, staring at the fire like it was the end of the world. Orville sat on the steps, useless and drunk. The flames jumped the barn roof and spread toward the corral. Horses screamed in panic, kicking and trying to break free. If they stampeded, they would run straight toward the steep canyon at the north edge of the property. "We'll lose them!" Josie cried. Clayton sprinted for his horse, but Josie wasn't heading toward the animals. She was running for the small shed. Seconds later, she emerged carrying a heavy Sharps rifle, a buffalo gun almost as tall as she was. It was old, worn, and powerful. Clayton's breath caught. Josie didn't hesitate. She didn't explain. She ran up the rocky ridge, overlooking the canyon path. She dropped to one knee, braced the rifle, and aimed not at the animals but at a rocky overhang above the canyon entrance. Clayton saw what she intended and felt awe rise inside him. Josie fired. The sound shook the night. A shower of rocks tumbled down, crashing into the narrow path and blocking it just as the terrified horses reached it. They veered away, running safely into the open prairie instead. The danger passed. The fire still raged, but the ranch had been saved from total disaster by that single shot. Clayton rode up the ridge to her. She was trembling from the force of the rifle, trying to breathe steady. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked. "My mother," Josie whispered. "She said a woman needs more than a needle and a smile to survive out here." Clayton touched her cheek gently. Not the scar, her cheek, the place she always tried to hide behind her hair. "Your mother raised a good woman," he said. Below them, the fire died slowly. And on the porch, Rosalind watched the two of them, with a face twisted in fear and something far darker. The next morning, Clayton found a half-burnt rag soaked in kerosene near the barn's ruins. It wasn't an accident. Higgins had set the fire. But the sheriff dismissed it with a shrug. "Dry season," he said, and rode off. Clayton knew then that the law would not help them. The ranch was at war, and they were standing alone. Still, they worked. Still, they planned. The land was wounded, but Josie refused to give up. Clayton watched her patch fences, divide feed, balance numbers, and keep her father's crumbling ranch alive with sheer grit and will. He admired her more each day. But something was changing in the Finch house. Rosalind's jealousy grew into something bitter and sharp. The town whispered that Clayton preferred Josie. And Rosalind, who had spent her life being admired, felt those whispers like knives. Her resentment turned into something dangerous, something desperate. She was about to make a choice that would betray everything her family had left. And that choice would put not just Josie and Clayton in danger, but the entire ranch. Clayton and Josie were preparing for a supply run when Orville Finch stumbled out of the house with a look of fear they had never seen on him before. His voice shook as he pointed toward Rosalind's room. "She was gone last night. I saw her ride out, came back before sunrise." She was muttering, kept saying something about the grotto in St. Louis. The blood drained from Josie's face. The grotto was their most guarded secret, the hidden spring that fed Whispering Creek. The one thing Higgins needed to destroy if he wanted the ranch for good. Josie's voice broke. No, she wouldn't. But she already knew the truth. Rosalind had told Higgins. Clayton's jaw tightened. Higgins is moving on the creek. We need to go now. Before they could mount up, Josie marched inside, her breath shaking. She threw open Rosalind's bedroom door. Her sister was packing a satchel. Where are you going? Josie demanded. Rosalind spun around, eyes wild. Away from here. Away from this misery. It's not my fault, you. And that man dragged us into a fight we cannot win. You told Higgins, Josie whispered. You told him about the grotto. Rosalind's face twisted. I saved us. If Higgins destroys that spring, you'll have no choice but to sell. You, Clayton, none of you understand. I'm giving us a way out. You sold Mama's land, Josie said softly, for a stagecoach ticket. Those words hit harder than any slap. Before Rosalind could answer, Clayton appeared in the doorway, breathless. They're riding for the canyon. We have to go, now. There was no time for more heartbreak, no time for apologies, no time for the deep wound Rosalind had carved through her family. Clayton, Josie, Peterson, and Will saddled their horses and rode, circling through the hills to avoid being seen. Josie led the way, guiding them to the narrow goat path, a steep, hidden trail she had climbed alone since childhood. It brought them above the grotto, high on a ridge overlooking the entrance. They arrived just in time. Higgins and his men were there, at least a dozen. 2 men carried heavy bags of dynamite. Higgins stood near the spring, his face smug with victory. Just like the girl said, Higgins crowed, quiet as a tomb. Clayton placed a hand on Josie's shoulder and handed her the heavy Sharps rifle. You're the best shot we have, he said. Aim for the dynamite. Josie lay flat against the ridge, steadying the rifle. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what her sister had done. Of what she had to prevent. Clayton whispered, I'm right here. She exhaled and fired. The blast of the rifle echoed through the canyon. The canvas bag below burst apart, scattering sticks of dynamite across the rocks. Before Higgins' men could understand what had happened, Peterson and Will opened fire, not at men, but at rocks, dirt, and empty ground around them. The echoes bounced through the canyon walls, sounding like a small army. Ambush! Someone screamed. They're all around us! Quote. Chaos erupted. Men scrambled for their horses, firing blindly, their bullets kicking up dust far below the ridge. Higgins, pale and shaking, grabbed his saddle horn and bolted, shouting at his men to retreat. In less than a minute, the canyon was empty. It was over. Clayton stood, chest rising with relief. Peterson whooped. Will grinned ear to ear. But Josie trembled, staring at the empty canyon floor. Not from fear, but from the pain of her sister's betrayal finally crashing over her. Clayton knelt beside her. You saved everything, he said softly. Not just today, all along. She looked at him, her eyes wet. Rosalind betrayed us, she whispered. She wasn't always like this. She chose her path, Clayton said gently. You chose yours. They rode back to the ranch in silence. Orville sat on the porch with his face buried in his hands. The stable was empty. Rosalind had fled. She was already halfway to town, and from there she'd go east and never look back. Josie felt something break inside. But she didn't cry. She had cried enough tears for a lifetime. Instead, she walked past her father, past the broken door, into the house she had fought so hard to protect. Clayton followed her. The days that followed were quiet. Higgins and his men vanished from the territory, chased not just by shame, but by a newly issued warrant for Higgins's arrest in 2 territories. Clayton's contacts had come through, exposing Higgins for the criminal he was. Whispering Creek Ranch began to heal. The barn was rebuilt, step by step. The cattle grazed in peace. The creek flowed without threat. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with gold, Clayton and Josie stood on the porch together. The air was warm and calm, the kind of peace that only comes after a storm has finally broken. I heard from my friend in Helena, Clayton said quietly. Higgins is gone for good. Josie nodded. She wasn't thinking about Higgins. She was looking at the land her mother had loved, the land she had saved, the land she refused to abandon. Clayton took her hand. "I came here looking for a place to settle," he said. "A place to start again." Quote. He looked at her the way no one else ever had, not at her limp or her scar, but at her strength, her courage, her steady, honest heart. "But land is just dirt without the right person beside you." Josie's breath caught. Clayton continued, "Josephine Finch, you are the bravest and strongest woman I have ever known. Your sister was called the beautiful one, but the world was wrong. True beauty is found in what you stand for." He stepped closer. "You held a family together. You saved this ranch. You saved me." Her eyes filled, but her voice didn't break. "What are you asking, Clayton?" she whispered. He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle as the breeze. "Will you help me rebuild this place?" he asked, "as my partner." Josie smiled, a full, warm smile that transformed her face into pure light. "I thought you'd never ask," she said. In that quiet moment, the dust of Redemption Gulch finally settled. Two overlooked souls stood together on land they had fought for, hearts steady, with the promise of a future built not on looks or status, but on shared strength and hard-won trust. They would rebuild the barn, they would rebuild the herd, and they would rebuild a life together, anchored in the deepest truth of the frontier. Real beauty is born from resilience. Real love is forged in fire. And the strongest hearts are the ones no one sees coming.